So the book, again, is called The Money Revolution, How to Finance the Next American Century. So we go through 110 years of history, and we study history to make better decisions for the present. And what this history shows us is that it is possible for the U.S. government to borrow on a multi-trillion-dollar scale, and for the Fed to finance this borrowing on a multi-trillion-dollar scale without the sky collapsing. And therefore, what I'm proposing in this book, in the third part of the book, is that the U.S. government finance, in cooperation with the private sector, a multi-trillion-dollar investment program over the next decade, investing in new industries and technologies such as artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotech, nanotech, genetic engineering, neurosciences, green energy, and the others that you can imagine. And if they do this, this would turbocharge U.S. economic growth, radically accelerate U.S. productivity, improve the income of every class of Americans. And not only that, it would produce technological miracles and medical breakthroughs, truly giving us the opportunity to cure all the diseases and radically expand life expectancy, rehabilitate the environment, and overcome many of the greatest challenges that confront humanity today, all at the same time that it would ensure that the U.S. maintains its military primacy so that we are not overtaken by China. And China is on the verge of overtaking us now. And if China in the year 2000, the United States invested 8 times more than China did in research and development. In 2019, China caught up. And if the current rates of growth continue, within a decade, in 1 year, a decade from now, they will invest 40% more than the United States does. If the United States allows that to happen, then China is going to develop artificial general intelligence before the United States does. I mean, everybody's talking about Chat GPT now, right? You can just see where this is going. It's not going to take long before the artificial intelligence is creating weapons that are unimaginably superior to the ones that we have at the moment. Whoever gets there first wins. And China is going to get there first if the U.S. doesn't radically increase its investment in new industries and technologies, which we could so easily do. For instance, just in 3 months, in the second quarter of 2020, U.S. government debt increased by $2.8 trillion. And during that same time, the Fed created $2.9 trillion to finance that borrowing at low interest rates. So that is a multi-trillion-dollar borrowing spree in 90 days. I'm not proposing a multi-trillion-dollar investment program to occur over 90 days. I'm advocating that it occur over a decade and be introduced gradually, with the government borrowing the money, the Fed financing the borrowing, and then with the government going into partnership with, let's say, the 10,000 leading American entrepreneurs and scientists, creating joint venture companies with these entrepreneurs and scientists, in which the government funds these companies lavishly in exchange for a 60% equity stake in these companies. And the managers, the entrepreneurs and the best scientists in the United States keep a 40% equity stake. And when one of these companies invents a cure for cancer, and another invents a cure for Alzheimer's disease and kidney disease and obesity, and diabetes, and all the other diseases, list these things on NASDAQ with trillion-dollar valuations, and the whole thing pays for itself many times over. And we cure all the diseases and radically expand life expectancy and make everyone much better off. This is what we can accomplish. And along the way, we can ensure that China doesn't overtake us militarily, that China doesn't develop artificial intelligence first, that we maintain the lead that we have enjoyed since probably World War I. If we don't radically alter our investment decisions at the government level, then the first American century is going to be the only American century. But if we adopt the possibilities that I've outlined in this book to invest on a multi-trillion-dollar scale, then the first American century will prove to be only the first of many.
So hopefully everybody else got chills there as well, because I actually completely agree with the way that Richard just framed that. Now, part of the challenge is I disagree with Richard on some of the details. But what Richard has very clearly laid out here is exactly what you hear me repeat repeatedly, which is this dynamic of dare to be great, dare to actually solve the problem. Right now, I would change some of the priorities, but I think he's hit on a couple of really critical components. One is this dynamic of who owns this? Well, guess what? You do. As an American citizen, you own 60% of any innovation that is created in this. Now, is that the right proportion? I don't know.
I don't know either.
Right? Correct. And that's the right answer, right? We don't know what the right answer is, but we should be having this discussion.
Quickly.
100% agree with that. And the second thing that Richard is saying...
Luckily, we are. Sorry,
we're starting to. We're starting to.
The Chips and Science Act passed, $280 billion investment. The passed Congress was signed into law by the president, $280 billion, $50 billion to be invested in developing U.S. semiconductor factories in the United States, and all the rest going to investments in new industries and technologies, all the ones I named earlier. This is a big first step in the right direction, showing it's possible.
I totally agree. I totally agree. To me, this was, and just to be very clear to everyone, I'm a voting Republican. It makes me want to vomit in my mouth that I have to say that and caveat it in any way, shape, or form, right? But I agree that this is the first step of saying, hey, we could actually do something different. So I'm very encouraged by that. I also just want to highlight people we've got we've got something like a $5 trillion U.S. government budget, and we're talking about $50 billion, right? Just stop and think about that for a second. It's tiny. The numbers we're talking about are really small, and that's one of the most powerful things Richard does in his book is he highlights, let's say we spent $10 trillion and none of it paid anything back. Guess what? We're talking about adding 20% to the debt to GDP of the country. Now, I may have particular disagreements around, do we choose to devote it here? Do we choose to focus it in human capital development? Do we choose to focus it in making better opportunities available for the vast majority of American citizens? And do we reinforce the dynamics of this is actually an open source movement within the United States from which all citizens should benefit? Those are all questions that we should have. But the fundamental message is the same, which is we're actually terrified to dare to be great. And we have to figure out a different way of doing it. Okay.
Yes. With that, with this book, what I'm saying is the U.S. should undertake a multi-trillion-dollar investment program over the next 10 years. How much? I don't know. Let's get started and see. If it overheats the economy, then we can slow it down. But just for the purpose of illustration, I set out examples for a $10 trillion investment program over 10 years, starting off gradually and then building up. And to have the most pessimistic scenario possible, I assume that every last cent of this $10 trillion is wasted. It doesn't make the GDP bigger, which of course it would. It doesn't bring any tax revenues, which of course it would. It doesn't result in any new technological breakthroughs. So in this worst case scenario, 10 years from now, the U.S. government debt to GDP, which the Congressional Budget Office forecast will be 121% of GDP 10 years from now. Instead of 121%, it would be 151. So that's a big number. But Japan today is 260% government debt to GDP. Japan was at 150% of GDP in 2002, 21 years ago. So in this worst case scenario where every last cent of $10 trillion is invested and produces nothing good whatsoever, the United States level of debt to GDP 10 years from now would be where Japan's was 21 years ago. And if the Fed finances this $10 trillion by creating paper money and nothing good whatsoever comes from it, then 10 years from now, the Fed's total assets as a percent of GDP would be 58% of GDP. Right now, the Bank of Japan's total assets are 4 times that. It's twice that level, 127% of GDP now. And the ECB, they're higher now than we would be 10 years from now. ECB's total assets to GDP are 65%. Japan's are 127% now. Ours, 10 years from now, the Fed would be 58% of GDP. So this shows you we can do this. We can do this very easily. It might not be, the hardest part is getting it through Congress. But, and no doubt there will be complications and problems, but we can overcome them. You know, every generation has to find solutions to the challenges that confront it. And our generation is going to have to do the same thing if we are going to survive and prosper. And this is my offer. This is what I'm offering as a solution. I'm happy to listen to other proposals. If they're better, I'll support them.
So I think that's a great opportunity for us to open it up.